Growing up in a big family that prioritized family values and connecting was quite the experience. You see, my parents were missionaries and we often traveled to different places, adopting children along the way. I was born into this life, and from the moment I took my first breath, my family became an ever-expanding circle of diverse faces, all bound together by love. When I was just a year old, my parents brought in my adopted sister, Shirley, from Ghana. The difference in our backgrounds never mattered. She was my sister, plain and simple. In our large family, Shirley and I became the oldest by default, taking care of our younger siblings and helping each other navigate the joys and challenges of life. What was particularly interesting was that not many people outside our family knew that Shirley was adopted. She looked strikingly similar to me and her biological parents, which often left people clueless unless they asked. It was one of our little secrets, a testament to how love transcends blood. College life brought about new adventures and challenges, especially in the realm of relationships. While studying, Shirley and I met Wyatt, a sweet, charming guy who quickly made his way into our hearts. I fell for him and he asked me out. Our love story began and life was pretty great. I had a man who cared for me and my sister was still my best friend. As the years rolled on, our relationship deepened, and it wasn't long before Wyatt proposed to me. The thought of building a life together filled us with excitement and dreams of a future we'd create side by side. But then something happened that would rock our relationship. One day, Wyatt decided it was time to share some aspects of his past that I hadn't known about. He began to reveal dark moments from his childhood, stories that painted a picture of a younger Wyatt I couldn't have imagined. It was shocking and sometimes horrifying, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit the image I had of the man I loved. His revelations about his past actions as a kid threw me for a loop, and I was left grappling with the newfound knowledge. While I knew that everyone had their share of youthful mistakes, what he shared was far from significant. It was as if the man I thought I knew had kept an entire chapter of his life hidden from me, and the secrets he had harbored for so long suddenly became our shared burden. I wasn't sure how to react, but I knew that we'd need to have some serious discussions and perhaps seek professional help to navigate through this storm. The truths Wyatt had unveiled had left our relationship in uncharted territory, and I couldn't help but wonder how it would all play out. After Wyatt had shared his dark past, I was torn between my love for him and the new, unsettling knowledge I now possessed. I hoped that my feelings for him would be strong enough to overcome my fear of the things he had done as a child. Surely people could change, right? The details he revealed about his behavior were alarming. This wasn't just a case of a kid who sometimes engaged in bullying or harmless mischief. Wyatt's actions had been severe enough that he had been admitted to the psychiatric ward at least 3 times before he turned 18. He was one of those kids who displayed signs of having the potential to cause real damage to property and people. I tried to move past it and understand that people grow and change as they get older. After all, he hadn't displayed any such behavior since I had met him. Still, the knowledge of his past strained our relationship. I was anxious, unable to fully shake the fear of what he was capable of. At some point, Wyatt sensed that something was amiss, and he asked if everything was okay between us. I broke down, my emotions overwhelming me, and I confessed that it was challenging to see past his dark past. This admission made him angry, and he regretted ever revealing his secrets to me, which we reached a breaking point, even contemplating calling off the wedding. But Shirley, my ever-supportive sister and good friend, stepped in. She convinced us to work through our differences and get married, reasoning that we loved each other enough to face any challenges together. Her words helped us regain perspective, and we resolved our differences and proceeded with the wedding. For a while, everything seemed fine and our love felt as strong as ever, but as time passed, I began to notice subtle changes in Wyatt's behavior towards me. He started being rude without reason, shouting at me over trivial matters, and generally becoming difficult to be around. I was left wondering what had caused this shift in his attitude and how to address it. It seemed like the demons from his past had resurfaced, and I couldn't help but wonder how this new chapter in our lives would play out, because I didn't sign up for any of this. Our relationship continued to unravel, marked by Wyatt's erratic behavior and the tension that lingered in the air. I couldn't ignore the sudden change any longer, and I began confronting him, asking him what was fueling his anger. But every time I tried, he shut me out, stubbornly refusing to talk about it. Then, one day, it all came crashing down. Wyatt exploded, his anger boiling over, and he revealed the real reason behind his outbursts. He was still furious with me for harshly judging him based on his troubled past. The words he hurled at me were a raw expression of his deep-seated hurt and resentment. I felt an overwhelming wave of guilt wash over me. How could I have misjudged him, causing him so much pain? I began apologizing profusely, assuring him that I had long moved past my initial judgments and that my love for him remained unwavering. And that's when Wyatt dropped another bombshell. He had been confiding in Shirley about his feelings and the strain in our relationship, and they had grown closer throughout the years. The revelation left me feeling a mix of emotions. I was surprised that he had spoken to Shirley about our problems, but even more puzzled that my sister hadn't mentioned anything to me. As I reflected on our situation, I realized that I was doing the same thing. During our worst arguments, I would lean on Shirley for support, confiding in her about the struggles Wyatt and I were facing. Now, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal, wondering why Shirley hadn't told me about Wyatt's concerns and feelings. After all, we were sisters, and I had hoped that she would be a mediator to help us navigate our issues. I decided to address this with Shirley. It was time to clear the air, rebuild the trust that had been shaken, and try to make sense of what was happening in our lives. I couldn't bear the thought of losing the bond we had as sisters, and I wanted to find a way to heal the growing rift between Wyatt and me. I couldn't contain my frustration any longer, and it was time to address the elephant in the room with Shirley. I had to understand why she hadn't told me about Wyatt talking to her. After all, we were sisters, and sisters shared everything, right? So, Wyatt told me something interesting. What did he tell you? Are you two fighting again? Yeah, we are, and apparently he's been telling you about us and our fights. Oh, yeah. Is there a problem? Well, yeah. Why didn't you tell me about Wyatt confiding in you? Shirley hesitated, her expression guarded. I didn't think it was necessary. I wanted to be a neutral party in this situation. I frowned, perplexed. But we're sisters, Shirley. We've always been each other's confidants. I thought we shared everything. So I'm not allowed to be closer to people other than you? That's not what I'm saying. I don't know. I just thought that you would have talked to me because we're sisters. We're close. She sighed and then looked me straight in the eyes, and what she said cut deep. Sally, I'm actually closer to Wyatt, if I'm being honest. Her words hung in the air, a heavy silence surrounding us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Shirley closer to Wyatt than me? Her own sister? My mind raced, trying to process it all. I spoke with a mix of sadness and discomfort. When did that happen? Well, we've always been pretty close. You forget we used to hang out all together. No, I was there, I remember. I just didn't know you two hung out, like exclusively. Yeah, well, it's been happening, and we've been hanging out a lot. I hang out with him more than you do, actually. Oh, well, this is news to me. Why haven't I seen you two hanging out together? Why am I only hearing of this now, Shirley? Look, I don't know what to tell you. This is just how things are. It's not like I love him more than you. Love him? In a friendly way, I mean. Jeez, relax. He's like a brother to me. I mean, he's literally my brother-in-law and my best friend. Our relationship isn't better, it's just different. But you just said you were closer to him. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that I don't love you. Shirley, you're talking in circles. No, I'm not. I don't know what your problem is anyway. My problem is that my sister and my husband are hanging out without me. Oh, come on, Sally. You're being dramatic as usual. We just hang out a lot. It's no big deal. Shirley, you two hanging out just doesn't sit right with me. You're my sister and he's my husband. I thought we shared a deeper bond. She folded her arms and challenged. And why should it be a problem if I'm close to Wyatt? You should trust me. This answer triggered a fiery argument between us. Accusations and harsh words flew back and forth, and it all culminated when Shirley hurled an insult that stung more than I cared to admit. Wyatt was right about you. You are a judgmental bee. The rage I felt at that moment was like a tidal wave of anger and hurt. I watched my sister storm off, feeling a storm of sadness and anger brewing inside me. It was unfathomable how the two people I loved the most were suddenly turning against me. The thought of losing both my sister and my husband was unbearable, and I was left with a heavy heart and a sense of betrayal that would be difficult to mend. With Shirley and me not on speaking terms, the tension in the house reached unbearable levels. It was as if I was walking on eggshells, trying not to set off any more landmines in our fractured relationship. Wyatt was growing increasingly frustrated by the strife between us, and I could see how it weighed on him. One day, as I was relaxing at home, Wyatt suddenly burst through the door, his voice brimming with anger. "Sally, you're an awful sister. I can't believe you." I was taken aback. "What's going on, Wyatt? Why are you so upset?" He explained, his frustration evident. "I just came back from being with Shirley, and she's not herself. She's sad and mopey, and I had to pry it out of her. She finally broke down and said that she'd had an argument with you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So she told you I was the one at fault?" He nodded, confirming that Shirley had shared her perspective of the argument, and he was convinced she was feeling hurt. And that's when I started raising my voice. "You don't even know the whole story. I'm sure Shirley twisted things." Wyatt's anger flared as he scolded me. "That doesn't matter. It's how she feels, Sally. You can't just invalidate her emotions." I felt the weight of his words, but I couldn't help but question him, my voice trembling. "But what about my emotions, huh? Why are you running to my sister before you talk to your wife?" Before I could give him a chance to answer, I asked him, "Do you love her?" Wyatt hesitated before whispering a soft no. I knew he was lying. His unwillingness to say it outright stung me to the core, and that moment I felt so alone, so betrayed. Tears streamed down my face as I yelled at Wyatt. "Get out! If you're always going to choose her side and never hear me out, then go back to her. You're not welcome here." Our home had turned into a battlefield, and it seemed that no matter how much I loved Wyatt, our relationship was cracking under the pressure of a sisterly bond that was now at odds with our marriage. As he left, I was left with a profound sense of despair, questioning whether we could ever regain the harmony we once had. 2 weeks had passed, and Wyatt hadn't returned home. There was a deafening silence in the house. No messages, no phone calls, nothing. The void in my heart seemed to grow with every passing day, and I cried myself to sleep every night, not realizing how dark and lonely my life had become. Then, one day, my phone pinged with a message from Wyatt. My heart raced as I saw his name on the screen, but the message was like a punch to the gut. "I want a divorce." Just 5 simple words, and it crushed me. The shock of it all left me breathless, and I couldn't fathom why he was being so cruel and distant. I wondered why he had married me if he harbored such deep feelings for Shirley. I felt like a fool for ever trusting him and not seeing the warning signs earlier. The pain was unbearable, but I felt so defeated that I didn't even want to fight for him anymore. I thought it was best to part ways amicably to minimize the agony. Our divorce process happened fairly quickly, as we had little to contest. Shortly after, about 2 months after it ended, I noticed a post from Shirley on social media declaring her marriage to Wyatt as the longtime friend and love of her life. It was confirmation of my worst suspicions. She had treated me as if I were expendable, a pawn in their relationship, and it made me sick to my stomach. I vowed never to speak to Shirley or Wyatt again. The hurt ran deep, and I wanted nothing more to do with them. Despite the immense sadness, I was determined to pull myself out of this abyss. I focused on my healing, tried to regain my sense of self and rebuild my life. Then, 7 months after the divorce, out of nowhere, Wyatt sent me a cruel and snarky test. "Guess I chose the better sister. Your parents couldn't even leave you anything when they died. They gave everything to Shirley and nothing to you. Serves you right for all the crap you've done to hurt your sister." I was stunned. My parents were very alive and well. It was a lie, a vicious taunt, and it cut deep. But if his wish was to hurt me, it was such a weird way to go about things. I couldn't believe the audacity of Wyatt's text. It had cut me deeply, but I knew I had to move on. To distract myself, I decided to check in on my parents, whom I hadn't heard from in over a year. They had gone off the grid to live in a rural spiritual settlement where they practiced meditation and mindfulness. The only contact they allowed was in cases of emergency. I'd considered reaching out when I was getting a divorce, but I felt my story was too sad and disruptive to their peaceful commune. However, after Wyatt's text, I needed to confirm my parents' well-being. Maybe he knew something I didn't. I was so freaking scared, and I had to make sure they were okay. So I called the emergency number they'd provided, and my heart raced as I waited for a response. When my parents' voices finally came through the line, I couldn't hold back my emotions any longer. I broke down and poured my heart out, telling them everything that had transpired over the past 10 months, the heartbreak, the strained relationship, and even the lie Wyatt had told about them. But it was my parents who dropped a shocking revelation. They explained that it was Shirley's biological parents who had tragically passed away and left her a meager inheritance of some trinkets. In reality, her parents hadn't been wealthy, but Wyatt must have mistakenly assumed that they were my biological parents, unaware that Shirley was adopted. As I heard this, I couldn't help but laugh, not because it was funny, but because I was taken aback by the sheer blunder. Wyatt's misunderstanding had fueled his resentment and cruelty towards me, and Shirley's own assumption had inadvertently fueled his misinformation. It was a bizarre chain of events that had led us all to this point, where I had been unfairly demonized and excluded from their lives. Still bewildered by the bizarre turn of events, I decided to call Shirley to gain some clarity on this mess. She answered the call with a tone of sadness, likely overwhelmed by the loss of her biological parents, whom she hadn't had a chance to reconnect with properly. I extended my condolences to her, and then I said that I wanted to talk to both her and Wyatt. She obliged, putting her phone on speaker. I couldn't hold back my frustration, letting Wyatt know that his text was cruel and inaccurate, though I was relieved that it wasn't true. "Sally, what is this all about?" "You're so stupid it actually hurts knowing that I ever shared my life with you. What you texted was so evil and inaccurate, so I came to embarrass the both of you." "Sally, please, I'm mourning." "I don't care. You two ruined my life. Before I ever speak to you again, I need you all to know the truth." I asked Wyatt to repeat what he said when he texted, and Shirley was confused. She asked him what he meant when he said that Sally's parents were dead. He sheepishly said that that was what she told him, that her parents died, so obviously that meant that Sally was also mourning. Shirley, her voice tinged with frustration and disappointment, began to speak, directing her words at Wyatt, who sat there seemingly flabbergasted. Wyatt, how many times have I told you about my past and my family and everything else? It's like you've got this selective hearing, only catching a fraction of what I say. Is it really so hard to pay attention when someone's sharing their life with you? For the millionth time, Sally's parents are my adoptive parents, not my biological parents. The atmosphere grew tense, with all of us silently acknowledging the damage caused by Wyatt's inattentiveness. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of empathy for Shirley. Despite our previous disagreements, we had both been wronged in different ways by Wyatt's lack of understanding and attention. I then inquired about Wyatt's earlier statement regarding my not getting any inheritance. He mentioned that Shirley had told him I wouldn't receive anything from it. Yeah, you idiot, she wouldn't inherit anything from my parents because they're not her parents. And if we're talking about inheritance, I should also mention that you're no longer in the will, Shirley. I told Mom and Dad everything, and they're beyond disgusted. You should expect a call from them soon. Wyatt tried to apologize, but the situation was rather awkward. I couldn't help but find some satisfaction in watching his ignorance unravel. I couldn't resist the urge to tell Wyatt he was an idiot. With that, I wished them a happy marriage and a nice life, and then I ended the call. As I disconnected, I could hear them bickering through the phone before the line finally cut. I couldn't help but laugh, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. It was clear that they weren't truly happy with each other, and my small revenge had brought me some much-needed closure.